How's everyone doing today? We're here for another episode. It is May 28th, 2025, and we're here for what started off as consistency is still going. We'll name this podcast later, but it's about being here, and we are here once again. How you doing this week, Frank?
I'm doing good. And you know what? I kind of felt led to open this session with prayer, so I'm going to do that, and then we'll dive in. Dear Father Yahweh, we thank you for this platform, this podcast, and we pray for everyone in our audience, and we ask a blessing upon them, and we pray for our country, we pray for our world, we pray for those in authority. And we thank you for your love, Yahushua Mekadesh. Thank you for your blessing. Amen. So, um, just before we came on, I saw something that got my attention. And I don't know if it was the reason why I was led to pray, which is probably something we should always do. But um, there was a report that there's a new tracking of COVID cases here in the United States. In fact, there's been a connection to people picking up the virus at various airports, and I understand that it's tracking quickly in Asia. So, as I said in past times on other platforms, that we have to keep our ear to the ground and be vigilant, thoughtful. If you notice people around you that are hacking or coughing and behaving the way someone would if they might have the Fauci, as I call it, then you should take take precaution. Now, just this particular episode is not about politics, but I must say that it's not without irony that there is these new cases on the front end of this new Trump administration, and we know that we got bombarded with it under his first administration. Some of us believe that this this Fauci is not something that just came about accidentally, and I believe that something nefarious may be going on. So I encourage all those people who believe in prayer to pray because we all know how terrible COVID-19 was when we all were social distancing and wearing masks and all that stuff a few years ago. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not something to be forgotten. Not that people ever stopped being affected by COVID, but my understanding is that there's a new strand that's running through Asia pretty quickly right now.
Yeah, nah, first, I couldn't really hear your prayer. I think it was picked up, but I couldn't hear it through my headphones at first. So I think we're all good now on the
Okay.
second part. So yeah, I know you wanted to kind of get into more of what we were talking about last time, in regards to instructions and things like that. So was there particular thing you wanted to start with, or
Yeah. Well, before I forget, I wanted to send a shout out to one of our previous guests, T Bless. Today's her birthday.
Oh, happy
So happy
birthday, T
birthday.
Bless. Happy
Yeah, happy
birthday.
birthday, T Bless. And many, many more. So, we left off in our last session talking about the importance of listening. And we we if you all recall, I shared as a post Mother's Day treat that the real deal's mother, Evander Holyfield, gave him the maxim to listen. And there's two more that we're going to go over today. Three maxims. She told him to listen. And we talked about how important it is to listen. I want to add something though. It's important to listen to the right voices, listen to the right people, because I don't know if you remember, you you might be you might be too young to have seen this. I think it was a commercial or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was a cartoon where you saw the character. He had this, I guess you would say, angelic figure on one side of his head, and then he had this other figure. I think the figure had a pitchfork. Of course, you know that stereotypically they got the devil with a pitchfork and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that stuck with me because we have that kind of battle all the time. We've got this one idea that is telling us to do something that is positive, and then we've got this other voice that's telling us to do something that's negative. And as I was preparing for this session, I was reminded of a book. I don't know if you've heard of the book Psycho Cybernetics. It's a
Mm-hmm.
book that came out years and years ago.
Yeah, I actually read that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by this guy named this doctor named Maxwell Meltz. And the premise of the book, I'm just going to read my notes, is that we have to steer our minds to a productive, useful goal so we can reach the greatest port in the world, peace of mind. So I wanted to kind of jump off there and say that whatever voice is communicating with us, the key question is whether or not that voice is leading us towards peace or chaos.
Mm-hmm.
One of my teachers, Apostle Dollar, shares the story of this guy, and I probably shared this before. Again, we all we all deal with this voice, especially if we're in a situation that might be frustrating. He shared the story of this guy. He's on his way. He's on his way to work, and before he left, his spouse told him that this was the last straw. If he didn't, apparently this guy had an issue with staying out all night and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of records about that kind of stuff. Uh, and his wife had warned him, if you don't come home tonight, we're done. So he's driving to work. Somebody cuts him off. He chases the person down, and they get into an altercation. The guy ends up in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, because this particular person has a short fuse and may be prone to listening to the guy with the pitchfork over his shoulder, now he's late for work, and when the police show up, he's on his way to jail. Well, the people at the job had already given him two strikes. And we know in baseball, three strikes, you're out. Now he's about to miss work again. So, number one, he's about to get fired from his job.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, he's getting locked up. His old lady had told him if he doesn't come home, they're done. And sure enough, he loses his job, he loses his woman, all because he listened to the wrong voice. And so I didn't really I didn't really talk about that part of it the last time we got together because some of us are, are vigilant listeners, but to the wrong message, to the wrong voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge is that, and this is especially important for young people, we both are very much involved with trying to help the next generation make good decisions. Let's say you're 17 and you got some guys, they're inviting you to come out, and you know that they they move a little sideways, and you hear the voice tell you to just stay home, but this other voice is saying, hey, you're going to be seen as a punk if you don't go out. And so many people don't ever make it back home because they listen to that other voice. I'm gonna pause there and let you. I know you got some thoughts on this particular stream of thought. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna let you chime in.
Yeah. So it seems like what the center of today's conversation will be around is like personal peer pressure, kind of. So we know because to me, when we talk about having the angel and the devil on your shoulder, it's like you know the answer for both paths, but it's just about your choice about which path you want to choose. Um, so when we're talking about making the right decision, I think that's kind of when we're do the right thing we know what we're supposed to do. But then when we're talking about the devil on our shoulder, that's kind of more leaning into in this case it would be like satisfaction of the flesh instead. So some people go down that route, and it's a real important decision because I think it does really ultimately set the path that you're going to continuously go on, or you're going to become accustomed to which voice you tend to lean towards in when it comes to decision making time. So if you start the habit of leaning towards the devil on your shoulder a little bit too much, then you may start to see more of your desired outcomes coming from that side. And you saw how you were saying in your other story how this man was on his third strikes and with his career with his girl, so he'd been leaning over to the devil side for all those other chances. And so a lot of times people look at that last time when it's like, oh, if I had just chose the angel on my shoulder instead this one time. But it's like you have to consistently choose the right decision. It's like a lot of people will look at that one time when everything came apart, but it's like you've been kind of leading up to this situation. For you to have two strikes, it means that you've been leaning towards the wrong decision multiple times, and then it's like you said, three strikes you're out. So that's when we finally come to the realization that, oh, now I'm starting to have the repercussions of my actions. Um, I was asking the other day, I forgot where I was, but I was just after I've been reading the Bible, I'll do some other studying, and so one question I had was like, why aren't we ever punished immediately after doing a sin. Like if we're like when you're a kid and a kid does wrong, it's like you normally correct it immediately, um, to kind of discourage that action. So I think so many people kind of go through life and then they might do something that they know is wrong to them personally, and then may not face immediate repercussions for that. And then so it's like, well, I didn't get in trouble for it last time, so now whenever it comes up again, that's kind of their justification. Like, well, last time I didn't get in trouble, or I did this last time and nothing bad happened. But like we said, now you're so accustomed to doing it, and then it might not be a major blow up at first, but eventually, if you keep picking left, then it'll eventually throw you off to the point where you can't really turn back. And I think that's what a trap a lot of people end up falling into in today's pretty much paradigm.
So, there was something I'm trying to remember when you said when you said the phrase lean into the flesh. There was something that you said the last time we got together, and I'm going to paraphrase it because it was really good. You said that something like I don't know if you said it was the media, but you reference a system that pretty much trains us to move towards our flesh. I can't remember what phraseology you use.
When I was talking about the mobile apps,
Yeah,
the
to
mobile
repeat what you
applications,
said last time. That was good.
yeah, they've well, not it's not a they. Society, we've developed so many social media apps, and it's kind of giving us like the ability to just do sinful things from our cellular phones, from our the comfort of our own home. So you have door dashes, which can be viewed for gluttony, Instagram, Tinder for lust, OnlyFans for lust. Those other things. They say the Robin Hood and the trading apps for greed. I wouldn't necessarily. And once again, it's not that these apps are made specifically for that, but it's just the fact that we have the access to kind of do wrong from our phone. So if so many people think of sinning as a personal act, then it's really something that you can do against yourself as well. So just always keep in mind that these even though there's no regular, like you're in the safety of your own home, but your actions can still fall into the lanes of being sinful. And it's just like, yeah, you can do that all from your phone. So you can what's some other let's see, you had the gluttony, we had greed, sloth, laziness. The wrath was like Twitter. People can be very wrathful on there. So it's just different ways that we don't necessarily think of that the enemy is trying to get to you, and so now they just have access to you 24/7 with you being on your phone all day. So always just be vigilant against just when you're letting your guard down, because it's a 24/7 fight.
That's good. That's good. You know, I was listening to what you were saying earlier about often people getting chance after chance, and it works like that many times. Sometimes it doesn't work that way because I was in an interesting conversation. I don't know if you saw the CN. I think I'm not going to call their name, but one of the major networks has a documentary. It's sort of a documentary flick on Kobe. I think
Hmm.
it's called The Making of Kobe. I don't know if
Okay.
you saw it
I haven't seen it yet.
in reference to Kobe Bryant. And I'm sure you heard when he got caught up into that trouble where he was accused of mishandling uh, a young lady in a hotel room,
Hmm.
and they were trying to throw the book at him. Now, what was interesting about that, and I was having a conversation with my friend about this. What the documentary showed us was that Kobe was very focused. He was that guy who it was basketball 24/7. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, when he first got into the NBA, part of his challenge as far as making new friends and relationships was that he was unwilling to hit the clubs and do the typical type of things that young rich men would do. So my speculation, along with my friend who I was conversating about watching this, was that perhaps, and there was, you may have heard the speculation that Kobe was in fact set up because that wasn't his thing to hang out. And at the time, he was already married when this happened, when he got caught up. And part of why we saw so much, um, some people thought that his response was guilt, but in the conversation I had, his response after the whole ordeal was being angry with himself that he allowed himself to get caught up into something that wasn't even his norm because he was the one who would typically, at least based upon what people said about him, he would be the one to listen to the voice, the angelic voice, and tell him to just stay focused. And he, finally he gave in, and so I'm sharing that because we have to be cautious if we have the habit of listening to that positive voice and we've got people who are insisting that we go in a different direction, we have to ask ourselves why are they so adamant about us going in this other direction, and what could be the what could be the result of going in that direction? What do they how are they benefiting? Why is it so important for me to go in this other direction?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a challenge that young adults especially run into all the time because when you're a teenager, part of the challenge is that you want to have new experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw it. There was a story about this. It was very traumatic. This 19-year-old young lady met this guy online. Allegedly, the guy came from a wealthy family. She became fascinated by him, agreed to go on a date with him. And when she didn't make it back home, her family became concerned. Well, when they put out a search for her, they found one of her body parts, if I'm not mistaken, in a body of water. And this guy who she had met up with, this clearly demonically possessed guy, had cut her up into pieces. So the question is whether or not this guy had given her any warning signs that he might have been off. And then two, where where do we draw boundaries? Because if I'm not mistaken, and I don't have the article in front of me, she had just met this guy online. They went out, hit a couple of spots out, and then she ended up at his place. And then, that's where he he committed ultimately committed the murder.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a part of this process is also understanding the importance of having having boundaries. And when this other person, this other voice is trying to push you beyond a preset boundary, you have to have the strength to say, hey, no, we can do this, but we're not going to do that.
Hmm. That is quite a lot. I have some thoughts when it comes to the Kobe situation. I won't speak directly on Kobe, but just how someone who wouldn't normally be in a situation like that can end up in a situation like that, because you only have to listen to that wrong voice once for it. Like, a lot of people make multiple bad decisions and they're okay, or they see people doing something this way multiple times and then they think that, oh well, if I do it once, sometimes you only get that one chance and that's enough to ruin your life for the rest of the time. So it's always a gamble when when you're choosing to listen to the right or the wrong side. So, and a lot of times, or what I was really trying to get to with the Kobe situation was, he could have been listening to the same voice he's been listening to and just gotten stuck into a certain mode. Like, if Kobe's always focused and is always trying to get something, or his mind is always focused on getting something that he wants. If you take that and misplace it in the wrong situation, now
That's
you're
good.
in a situation where you're willing to break the law to get something that you want. So now it comes down to, okay, am I going to, and I think that's a fight a lot of people deal with on a daily basis. It's like they're accustomed to doing things one way, or I'm used to getting results this way. Like, some people be like, oh, every time I study this way, then I'm able to pass the test. And then you go to college and then you try and study that way and it doesn't get you the same results. So it's like you have to adapt your methods to the situation that you're in. And so that comes with decision making as well. So, and I see that with, because it's a lot of times, especially from people's personal or their public facing persona, that it's a lot of people you could never see doing things. And when something comes out about somebody who you don't know personally, you may be very reluctant to believe some of the accusations that are being alleged in a lot of situations. But we're not there. Like, we don't ever struggle with the same things that person who's being accused is going through. So it's always very difficult for us to be the people who are speculating whether something happened or not in a situation. And I think I see that happening so frequently now on social media, to where we're only getting bits and pieces of any case, any news story, and from those bits and pieces, you can choose to believe what you want to and what you don't want to believe, and say, oh well, this part wasn't proven in court, this part would, So there's just, as spectators, we're never gonna have all of the full answers, or all of the full details. So that's kind of when it comes to, as a regular person, who are you to judge? We can't be the judge. We don't know what information has been excluded, included falsely, So there's just so many things, and I think so many people feel like it's now their duty to have some type of opinion on every situation that pops up in the news, when really we're not qualified on many levels to really discern what happens in a lot of situations. So that's kind of more just what I wanted to say about that. Once again, not directly dealing with Kobe, but just like situations like that, and you know and what I'm seeing on platforms like Twitter is that both sides have their people committed to their idea. So you could say, "Oh, this I know that this happened." You have one side saying, "I know that this happened. I know X, Y, Z," and then this one saying, "I know this happened X, Y, Z," and none of them are really pairing up. So it's like now there might be valid points on side A, there might be valid points on side B, but people are only going to highlight the ones that help their cause for whatever outcome they feel is is what's just or not. And that's a get into a very critical point, especially with everything being online. So we still you have the legal court, and then you have the court of public opinion, which is really just as damaging today as it would be in the court. So some things you might not even make it to a legal courtroom, but your reputation is destroyed due to the court of public opinion. So those decisions that you have to think even so, because a decision might not even be illegal that you're doing, or it might not be wrong, but it can be looked at a certain way by other people, like by your peers, by other people. And so that's another really another set or level of accountability that people need to have, a little accountability and discernment that I think a lot of people can kind of or forego and don't kind of consider when they're making a lot of decisions.
So there's a whole chapter in my book, The Hustler's Guide to God, that deals with words. And words do matter. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this whole premise of good luck, bad luck. And, I don't really deal in that area, good luck, bad luck. But let's just, for those people who do, if you notice that since you started hanging out with X, Y, and Z, your luck has turned good, then what you have to do is evaluate, okay, what is it that I'm hearing when I'm with X, Y, and Z that might have something to do with a change in my fate? To the contrary, if you notice that since you started hanging out with B, D, and J, your luck has gone bad, now you have to start to think, okay, what is it that I'm hearing that might play into the the, the shift in my fate? Because way before we actually take action, there's some words. Now, a lot of those words are coming from other sources towards us, but sometimes the words are simply what's revolving in our own heads. But the company that you keep matters. And there's two prominent cases that I'm thinking about right now, and I'll never forget it because there were two people that I was associating with fairly recently, and they went from night, they went from day to night. They went from day to night in terms of their behavior. They started moving different, and that shift can be associated with new company, new company. And that might be the number one challenge for most people, not just teenagers and young adults, people period. And of course, if your fate has shifted to the positive, and remember what I said earlier, we are seeking to find ourselves in a space of peace. Now, of course, you know, when we're listening to some of our favorite hardcore music and we're thinking about being completely turned up, and maybe the lyrics are suggesting that we want everything other than peace. But when everything comes back to a place of normalcy, and when we decide that we want to experience a level of enduring comfort, usually peace is an important part of that process. When you find yourself in a situation where you're up all night worrying because of lifestyle choices, then as turned up as you might have felt that you were, you will soon realize that it wasn't worth it. So um, I think that's an important piece that another important piece that I want to attach to this whole listening thing. Now, okay, I'm going to go get to the next thing because ironically, you kind of in our last episode, you kind of took us to our next maxim, which is follow instructions. The, the last episode, I asked you the question in the workplace, asked you about how important listening is in the workplace. And I think your response had to do with it was more about following instructions. So Evander's mom told him to listen and then follow instructions. Now, of course, right along with what I was saying in terms of listening, you have to follow the instructions that's going to lead you to a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, if you follow the wrong instructions to a T, the product it's like anything else. If you're trying to bake a cheesecake and you're following the recipe for a red velvet cake, you're going to get a red velvet cake. So we have to follow the the proper instructions. And again, talking to young people, believe it or not, at one time I was a teenager, and I didn't. sometimes I didn't think that my parents or the coach or whoever that authority figure was had the right ideas, and sometimes they didn't, but more often than not, they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe rather than just blowing off what you're hearing from them, you should at least weigh it or do some research.
Mm-hmm.
But to blow it off without um,
The right
enough,
consideration.
right, without enough information to justify blowing it off, because there's a good chance that the information that they're giving you, the suggestion they're giving you, is based upon some experience. But if you have zero experience and you're blowing it off, then that might not be so prudent.
Mm.
One of the things that my mentor said to me years ago, and I tried to abide by it, it's much easier to glean from somebody else's lesson than to have to learn the lesson from scratch. In other words, this person has took all the knocks to get this lesson, and then he comes and presents what he's learned as a result of going down that path. You can either listen and accept the gift of the lesson that he learned from going down that same path that you're trying to go down, or you can go down the path yourself and take all the lumps that come along with going down that path yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I think that kind of goes back into how we're continuously talking about hip hop and rap and, people looking to that. We do talk a lot about how at the core of a lot of hip hop is rebellion. So I think in like a scenario that you're talking about, when people are distrusting of the system that they're in, then sometimes rebellion feels um, like the right thing to do. Because if you don't agree or associate with some of the methodologies or ideologies of the ruling class, then to you rebellion is righteous. And in a lot of these cases for hip hop, we see people kind of acting or not acting out or telling their story based off of the lessons that they learned in hopes that other people can hear it without having to go through the same thing. But a lot of people are listening to it as a way to learn the proper way to rebel almost, or they're looking for a recipe for they're looking for the artist. And let's say just using Young Thug as an example, they're looking at him as the recipe for success. So now people do which if we're not ever distinguishing the parts that made him successful or the specific things, then we can be duplicating the wrong or following just the wrong ingredients that he's because he's successful. But if you're just using, now let's say you're using too much just saying gangsterism as a as something to kind of get to your success, and now you overdo it, and now your results aren't ending up the same as Young Thugs, to where you're able to do XYZ, still get out, come back to a career. A lot of people don't get that luxury. And if they're using Young Thug as a blueprint, then you'll be like, oh, but I did everything Young Thug did. It was like, yeah, he was kind of more of a lucky scenario. So you can't go assuming that you'll have the same luck, the same grace, or the same opportunities that somebody else had. It's not, and I wouldn't even say it's supposed to be a blueprint, but you're supposed to improve on the method. So it's like you're supposed to do what Young Thug did without necessarily getting into trouble with the law, or skip the parts where he was breaking the law or in not in line with what society deems is okay. But that comes down to what your personal beliefs are. So if you believe that the society that he was able to defeat is evil, is inherently evil, then now you're gonna look at what he was doing as inherently good just by default. So that's kind of the philosophy a lot of people adopt in hip hop when they see somebody successful, and you see people almost getting rewarded for glorifying what we kind of view to say is glorifying some of the negative aspects of their come up story. But I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily put that on the artists themselves. That's what us as a society, and comes from watching just childhood stories like Robin Hood and you know, things where, you know, the little guy finally overcomes things like that. So it becomes a very interesting discussion when we're really when we're getting down to the psychology of why some people follow this person, some people follow that person, and subsequently the decisions that they continue to make based off of what they feel is morally right and morally wrong. Because then we still have, you know, the street code where there's no snitching. Like, I don't know if you saw, Young Thug was calling Kid Cudi a rat for testifying in the Diddy case. And, you know, Kid Cudi's not necessarily a street dude. But if you are someone who adopts Young Thug's ideology, then yeah, what Kid Cudi did would have been morally wrong or against the people's personal morals. So I think that's another, like, in society we don't, not everyone is following the same morals as we used to. Like, things have broken down into kind of subcultures. So what's morally acceptable over here may not be morally acceptable over here. And not even for any particular reason. That's just kind of how things have kind of played out, especially in hip hop. So, you know, since we don't have any written code in hip hop, it's like, okay, now everyone is kind of by default, which is something I don't like, because, you know, if you're someone who's not like into any street stuff or anything, then it is like, who do you expect to protect you? Some people, especially if you're black, some people feel like the police are against black people, so they're saying by helping the police lock up another black person that you're inherently evil. And so these are some of the discuss, like, it's not being really talked about out loud, but that's kind of what's going on in the minds of some of these kids when you're looking like, oh, all they want to do is just not listen, they don't want to fuck. But it's like their ideology is that this system that we're in is evil, and so by following the rules of an evil system, you're evil by default. That's just a thought process that I think a lot of young people run into in general, and I think it's been happening for years, and I think it's going to continue to happen.
You know, success is relative. And again, success is relative to who it is that one considers their master. Of course, you know the rapper Mace. Years ago, I read his book, and you also know that the rapper Mace is also a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
He has a church here in Metro Atlanta. And in his book, he now one of the most significant things that I saw in the book, which was sort of a turning point in his career, he said that he saw himself as leading, I guess we would call a reverse Million Man March, because of course Apostle Farrakhan had a positive plan with his Million Man March, but May said he saw himself leading a Million Man March to hell,
Mm-hmm.
and that success for the devil is what caused him to make the shift that he made, and bat for a different team.
Mm-hmm.
So you know when it comes to him and some of the other people in popular culture, success is relative. And yeah, if Young Thug was a participant in our conversation, perhaps he would consider himself to be successful, yes, by the world standards. But I'm not sure that by the standard that Yahweh would test his actions by, I'm not sure if he would be considered successful by any stretch of the by the stretch of the imagination. And the challenge, which I think is an important point that you're raising, is that for a lot of people, they are getting their standard from popular culture. and popular culture is letting a lot of people down. And
Mm-hmm.
whereas Young Thug and some of the people that the world would prop up there may have the resources to get themselves out of a jam, the typical person who follows that path won't have the resources to get out of the jam.
Right.
And so it's a nasty game, a nasty game.
I mean, but it's really our current because once again, it's like I think I wouldn't say Malcolm X was on. I think he was almost like a model type for what a lot of rappers want to be, like especially when he was Detroit Red early on in his lifetime. To see that transformation from somebody who was street into somebody who had political influence, it's like a lot of people look at that as the new blueprint for success. So, but it's like when that's um, prompted as your role model, then I think that's more for people who have maybe started off on the wrong path early in life and want to have some type of redemption. um I don't know if we ever, I don't know if we were talking about this on this platform, if I was having a conversation with someone else, but to me, the role of like a gangster or a thug is almost like an accepted it's almost like accepting the identity of a sinner in a sense. So, and I think so many people gravitate towards that because nobody is born free of sin, and it's almost like by embodying the fact that, or by kind of understanding that you are imperfect, or that some people accept that they're imperfect and continue to fully live by the fact, or they accept the fact that they're not perfect. So, and so many people will deem the image of a thug or a gangster as negative, um, because they associate it with sin. So it's like you can be dressed as a thug, you might not be doing anything, but people are looking at that persona of you in a negative light because of because of how associated they are with it is with other sins. So it's like you see someone sagging their pants, and automatically you're associating it with criminal activity. But at the same time, the person who has that perception might not be living the perfect saint life as themselves. So it's like that's almost a way for people to um in a way feel like they're above other people when you judge and say that, oh, this person's dressed like a thug, or um when you see people celebrate, or just doing something maybe overly black, that now is so closely associated to criminality and to sin that when people see that and have that judgment, that they feel like they're better than that person because they're not doing, oh, I'm not doing that over there. So but that's when it comes to no sin is all sin is sin. Like there's no sin that's greater than the other. So it's like somebody's like, oh well, I never killed anybody, but you might lie. People lie to themselves all day, every day. So it's like you're not really absolved just because you see other people struggling with sins that you view or you deem worse than the sins that you're committing. So that's where a lot of people get into a hypocritical part when it comes to dealing with rap, because so many rappers are simultaneously looked at as thugs and gangsters just by default. They might not even be rapping anything that's remotely street, but just the term rapper is like the new thug or the new gangster. So then all those words get, and when people, and if you're in an area that's been deemed as like, I live in a not necessarily affluent area in Atlanta. So it's like if people can look and then say, oh yeah, everyone in that area is a criminal, or but that's really not the case. So that was just some of what I was thinking when it just comes to because it affects all black people, because it's like, yeah, no, not everyone is a thug gangster, but when that's so much of in popular culture what people see, then that generalization gets casted onto anybody who you might see in this area. So, and that's never fair, and it's just kind of a cycle that's going to continue perpetuating negative images of people who grow up in this area, who choose to come visit this area. And it's something that's hard to break once that idea is already planted in people's minds.
So that you made me think about a few things, and this was something that came out the last time. With all of this talk about right and wrong and sin. First of all, let me say that I'm not perfect, and this is not about me. And I'm pretty confident that you also are not trying to project that you feel that you're perfect.
Not at
What
all.
this what this is us trying to help us to position ourselves to make the best decisions possible. As you were talking, I realized that if a person develops a trend of listening to that contrary voice, and that's the power of repetition. So the power of repetition can have a positive effect, and the power of repetition can have a negative effect. So if you're constantly hearing a particular message over and over again, then a person can lose sight of what is positive, what is negative, because all they're hearing and all they're exposing themselves to is one thing. And so perhaps, and I mean, this sounds, for some people, this might sound outrageous, but perhaps we have to have a session where we talk about just what peace looks like. Because for some people, if they've been in chaos their entire life, they don't even have a concept of what we're talking about when we say peace.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can give one example, and I think everybody can relate to this. So, the average young person, the average young person knows what peace in their body looks like. You get up, you can eat 3 bags of Takis and a whole pound cake, and it has no effect on you
Mm-hmm.
because you're 15, you're healthy, you know, and it doesn't cause you eating eating that way doesn't cause you to vomit. It doesn't cause you diarrhea or any of those things. But that same person, if they ever catch the flu, you're able to juxtapose peace in your body with illness, because you know that when you're breaking out in the sweat and you're vomiting, you feel weak. That's that's what lack of peace in your body is like. Well, in our life, we should not only experience peace as far as our physical body, we should experience peace socially in our relationships with other people. We should experience peace financially, we should experience what my teacher calls total life prosperity. And so, yeah, I think we need to talk about that because I promise you, there are people who are listening to us and they have no idea what we're talking about because they're used to doing things in a particular way so long that in their minds, as long as they're getting the paper, or I don't even know, they still calling it paper. What they call it
It's
now,
digital now. It's only
right?
no more paper. Paper money is coming to an end.
As long as they're getting paid. For some people, as long as they're getting paid, everything is well.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be the furthest from the truth
Mm-hmm.
because you could be getting paid out the wazoo and struggling in so many other areas. You're for an example, if you're not getting along with anybody in your family, if every time you and your family members get together and it's World War III, that's not normal.
Yeah.
Now you may think that's normal because that's all you have seen, but let me tell you, that's not normal. So that's one area where you need peace because you should be able to have you should be able to sit down to dinner with your siblings or your cousin, your parents. But if every time you're with your family members and you get nauseous and you got to storm out because if you don't, somebody's going to get hurt, that's not normal. So, and as far as your family is concerned, you're not experiencing peace. Okay, so that's just one example, but I think we're going to we need to do a whole show on what peace looks like in different areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question becomes, going back to what we were saying earlier, the decisions that we make, will these decisions lead to peace in the different areas of our life, or will it lead to chaos? If I take this ride with my boys, well, let's ride that I'm going to take with my boys. Will it lead to peace with your parents, or will it lead to chaos? Or because your pops has already told you that you need to stop hanging out with B, G, and J, but for whatever reason, you're addicted to hanging out with them. And he already told you if he see you with them again, you're gonna have to get your own place to live.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, I think this kind of ties into when you were talking about pieces, and we don't have to get all the way into it, but that's where a lot of drug use comes from, because a lot of people aren't ever introduced to, or they don't even know what peace is until they smoke a joint for the first time, or they have a drink for the first time. So it's like
That's good,
a
Dre.
lot of people will be in pursuit of that peace that you're like, if that's because some people get all the way to college, never been diagnosed with anything, and so the first time they get some substance recommended to them by a friend, and it complete like it's the first time their mind has been quiet in their whole entire life. It's like now they're addicted to that
That's
feeling,
good.
and so
That's
that's
good, Dre.
yeah, like I said, we don't got to get all the way into it, but as you were saying, I was like, yeah, that's something that leads to a lot, and yeah, we have to look at that as a source of so when you see a lot of drug abuse problems in an area that is very dysfunctional, we have to remember that that's some people's only way of regulating or dealing with the circumstances that they're faced with on a daily basis. So it's not so easy to judge, and it's like, yeah, I get off the exit every day and I see someone, and it's like you can't help everybody, or you get to. I've lived here almost 10 years. If I was every time I saw someone who needed help, it's not realistic, but you can still have sympathy and empathy for that person who never had any other options or never learned another way to deal with their traumas and hardships. And so, just keep that in mind as you're going through your day and before you choose to judge other people, because we really don't know what other people or what battles they're facing, or what they're really going through.
So, um, you said a mouthful there, and man, I'm gonna make a note because we definitely have to deal with this. And um, I like you kept saying we're not going all the way in, but I do have to say this because so many of the addictions that we all find ourselves in has to do with seeking that peace. Now, from a from a conscious standpoint, you may not realize that that's what you're after, but that's what you're after because that's the natural human desire. We all trying to get back to Eden, as I would call it. That's our natural homeostasis to get to peace. Now, uh, my friend Swedish, she got me watching this show, my 600 pound life. I don't know if you ever saw that show.
Hmm.
And my goodness, if you listen to some of these people share,
Right.
one of the common things they'll say is that they don't feel good unless they're eating. So the question becomes, we watch that show, those of us who don't have that challenge, and yo, how the f this person get that big? Yo, that's crazy,
Exactly. Hmm.
right? Saying that while they dealing with their 12th blunt for the day. See what
Hmm.
I'm saying? So saying that, but this person, they're saying that their addiction is different from yours, different from mine.
Right.
Some of us, we, you know, we if we don't nut 2 or 3 times a day, we're not right. And so for some people, that's their nirvana. And so again, you know, one of Rakim's lines, I don't remember which which rap it is, but he says that his trademark is left throughout the projects. Now, of course, we know what he's talking about.
Hmm.
And some brothers, without even hearing that rhyme, they have embodied they've embodied that ethos and they've just decided that they should put their image all over the state, um, because when they're doing it, that's when they're at peace. But again, if you're not able to provide the necessary support for your likeliness, then you bring a lot of discomfort to somebody else. So yeah, you had a great time creating Little Trevor, but now Little Trevor is going to be with you for 18 years. Now what?
Yep. Temporary pleasures lead to long-term consequences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Evander's mom told him to listen, follow instructions, and never quit. Now he took the never quit part and decided that as a professional boxer, when he was up against the worst odds, that he wouldn't give up. Now, over the years, I've kind of flipped that last one,
Hmm.
and I actually did a post on a different platform some time ago, encouraging people to quit. Quit what? Quit the quit the habits that's interfering with you being your best self. So we all have our own thing that we need to quit. For some people, they need to quit procrastinating. So we talked about this before. There are people who may have their own critique about our podcast, and in their mind, they could do it 1,000% better, but I, it's only in their mind because they've been saying that for over a year, and they haven't taken one step in the direction of doing their own thing. Dre and I both encourage you. If you got something to add to the discussion, something that will help move the world forward, do it. Because I'm the first to tell you, I don't see you as competition. If you're adding to what we're trying to move forward, go for it. But procrastination is what you need to quit. Quit procrastinating. Do it. You know, like Nike says, just
Just
do
do
it.
it.
Just do it. And then you'll find when you start doing it, I bet you'll respect us a little more because you'll find out that it's a little more to it than what it looks like.
It's a lot. Gotta be consistent with it, man. Like, well, like so many people don't know what it takes to do simple things that they see every day. They look at it and they're like, oh yeah, that I could do that, and it's like, yeah, just give it a try. Or it's not about doing it once; it's about how consistent can you be in something. So and it's like, yeah, regardless how you feel about this podcast, it's like we've continued to show up every other week, for over a year, and so many people they end. I don't even we don't even know how many episodes we have at this point. We have I do need to count them again, but some people don't even make it to 5 episodes of doing something similar, and it's sometimes because you can't meet up with people, sometimes because you got technical. There's a million things that can get in your way. We faced a million problems, setting up week after week. Sometimes, we have audio issues prior. Sometimes we do a whole show and nothing comes of it because I wasn't recording properly or something. So we've had all of those pitfalls, but yeah, when you're consistent at something, you'll get your right results. So it's just it is to quit the procrastination, but don't quit on your ultimate goal. So keep on, take what you're procrastinating on, and just try and be consistent at it, or consistently try not to procrastinate. That might be your best advice right there. So
And to the point that you're making, whatever it is that you're endeavoring to do, you I'm talking to our audience. Dre's used the word consistency a lot, and that's how we started this whole process talking about consistency. Going back to Kobe, one of the greatest basketball players to ever do it, Kobe would consistently put up 1,000 shots every day. 1,000. Now, if you played any hoops, that's a lot of shots to put up every day. And most people who, in their minds, because I'm a former street baller, and there were people that I played with that they were nice with it, but they weren't willing to take that extra step, that step that I'm talking about, that Kobe took
hmm
to get to the league, because of course, when you get to the league, everybody's good.
yeah,
So you will have had to have done a little more in order to get to a champion level. And you were saying something earlier. Um, at every level, we all have to do a little more. I'm not going to name the quarterback, but there's a certain quarterback that I believe now, like you were saying, in terms of these artists who have gotten themselves into different issues and stuff. We weren't there. We don't know exactly what happened. And there was a particular quarterback who went to the Super Bowl and he totally underperformed in the Super Bowl compared to how he had performed during the regular season.
Mm.
And I was fond of saying that that quarterback didn't understand what Tom Brady understood. And that is that once you leave the regular season and get into the playoffs, you have to kick your game up another notch
Mm-hmm.
because what you were doing in the regular season is not enough in the playoffs.
Right.
And then whatever you did to get to the Super Bowl, once you get to the Super Bowl, you got to go up another notch. So this particular quarterback, he was still doing what was working during the regular season, and it didn't work in the Super Bowl.
Mm. Trying to elevate your game for the
Yeah,
different circumstances. Rise
yeah,
to the occasion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, look, I think this is a good starting point, stopping point, I should say,
Mm.
because to continue, we'll end up at another layer with this onion, and I think we put a whole lot out there at this point.
Yeah. I've been I know I need to it's on my to-do list, but I need to start cutting up our full podcast into smaller segments or so that's been on my to-do list to go back, watch some of the older ones, put some timestamps in it, and then take some smaller chunks, maybe it'd be like 5 to 10 minutes of some of our conversations and put them out, just so it's easier for people to get the information, because a lot of times we'll have it on YouTube. I know it's daunting to see hour and a half or 2 hour podcast, so I know a lot of the information does get lost in there. So yeah, that's something that I'm gonna try and do this week, and so people be on the lookout for some shorter or just more clips of. I got to get into the clip aspect of doing this show. Like the TikToks are one thing, but I feel like even those kind of just give such a small soundbite that you don't necessarily get the whole perspective of the conversations that we're having at times. So yeah, I'm trying to. I think the TikTok is still good for promotional use, but in terms of getting what we're actually discussing out, I think it needs to be a little bit longer than TikTok, but a little bit shorter than the full length of the episode. So we're gonna try and find that balance and hopefully deliver this information and these discussions to you in a little bit more digestible segment. So we're here in the or we're taking feedback. I'm taking feedback on my end. I know Frank's getting feedback on his end, and so we're trying to bring you guys the most value in our show with the time that you do choose to spend with us. We do thank you for the support over the past year and change, almost year and a half probably. So we appreciate it. Everyone who's liking, commenting, people who subscribed, and like I
And
said,
sharing,
yeah,
because people have
sharing is
been
big.
sharing too. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we're seeing we're seeing results in the on the channel. I'm trying to. I know I need to kind of separate. I don't know exactly how I'm gonna do it, but I'm posting the music and these podcasts on the same channel. I don't know if that affects anything. I mean, the podcasts are able to be monetized in the future. They're not monetized yet, but they'll be eligible for it. The music streams aren't going to be. So that's really just more of a way to gain attention, gain traction, and we're trying to get people to into one place to where we can have more open discussions and better dialogue. So there is an ultimate plan for what we're doing, and like we're this is just like a starting point where we're here, me and Frank having these open discussions with each other, hoping that you guys can grab onto one of our perspectives, whether you're older, whether you're younger. Um, and yeah, we do plan on having more guests in the future. Again, happy birthday, T Bless, um, and the other
And let me
people
say
that's
this,
out
Trey,
there.
because I also know that this is part of the plan for We the Source. Ultimately, if I'm not mistaken, the idea is that there'll be other shows, because
Mm-hmm.
this is a platform. So, if those of you who have the wherewithal to support another person's thing and you get the vibe of what Dre is seeking to create, you could very well in the very near future host your own show.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's easier for us. It's easier for Dre to give you that opportunity if you you get you've got the vibe of what it is that he's seeking to create. Because obviously, those people who are rocking with him already, it's going to make sense to give those people a first shot than somebody that just appears out of thin air. So
Mm-hmm.
trust me, it's if you're thinking about doing your own thing, then keep watching, keep listening. Before long, that opportunity will come.
Yep, that's the truth. And yeah, if you do need help getting started, reach out to us, and we're here to give the knowledge, because we struggled through a lot of growing pains just doing this on our own. We didn't really have other people who are in this industry already to kind of piggyback off of, but as part of building a community, any way that we can help, we're open, we're here to do that and willing to. So we want to see more people get into their creative bag, because I'm of the belief that everyone's opinion is valuable, even if you might not know everything about the subject that you're talking about, but your perspective is valuable and important, and it should be heard in creative way. So keep that in mind, and keep creating, and we let's work together in the future.
All right. Well, you guys have a great night, and thank you so much. And we'll see you, Yahweh willing, in another couple of weeks.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everyone. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.